Part 1, The Rebirth and the Decision. The clock ticked loudly, almost mocking the silence in my room. My hands trembled as I picked up the application form for studying abroad. It felt surreal. Just yesterday, I had been on the brink of a life I didn't want. Yet today, I was standing on the edge of a new beginning, with the past hovering behind me like a shadow. Ryan was the reason I had ended up in this mess, and now he was the reason I was fleeing from my own life. In my past life, I had sacrificed everything for him, my career, my youth, my happiness. I had borne his children, taken care of our home, and devoted myself entirely to him. All for what? To be left with nothing but the wreckage of a marriage he never valued. At the end of it all, when he was lying on his deathbed, his final wish had been to divorce me. His request? So that he could reunite with his first love, Lily, in the afterlife. He even knelt before me, pleading with me to grant him this a last wish, as if he were some tragic hero from a forgotten romance. The man I had given everything to wanted to die with someone else, and he wanted me to make it happen. I had been devastated. My heart had shattered in a way I didn't think was possible. The pain had been unbearable, leaving me with nothing but a hollow, empty shell. Depression had consumed me. I had withered away, mentally and physically, unable to escape the nightmare of betrayal that had unfolded before my eyes. But just when I thought my suffering had no end, something extraordinary happened. I woke up. It was as if the universe had granted me a second chance. I found myself back in time, in the years before my marriage to Ryan. The weight of my past life was gone, replaced by a sense of disbelief and overwhelming clarity. This time, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I would give them exactly what they wanted: separation. No more sacrifices, no more love, and no more pain. The first thing I did was submit my application to study abroad. I wanted to put as much distance as possible between myself and Ryan. I needed to escape, to live a life that was mine and mine alone. When the application was approved, I felt a rush of freedom, something I hadn't felt in years. Sonia, my closest friend, was the first person I told. She had always been by my side, through thick and thin. As soon as she saw the approval notice, she dropped her coffee in shock. I couldn't help but smile a little at her reaction, though the smile didn't quite reach my eyes. "Are you serious?" she gasped, eyes wide. "Aren't you about to get married? Have you even discussed this with Professor Carter?" Just last week, I had been enthusiastically sharing wedding plans with her. And now, here I was, planning to leave the country, leaving Ryan behind. The abruptness of it all must have been hard to digest. But I didn't care. I gave her a calm, calculated response. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for further studies. I don't want to miss it. The wedding will have to wait." I didn't mention Ryan's name when I spoke. The thought of him was like a sharp, thin needle piercing my heart, but I wouldn't let her see my vulnerability. I didn't need her sympathy. Sonia was staring at me, disbelief written all over her face. She was struggling to comprehend what was happening. Her voice wavered. "Are you really sure about this? I mean, after everything? You're just going to leave him behind?" I didn't flinch. I was done. In my past life, I had loved Ryan, but love had never been enough. He had loved someone else all along. All the sacrifices I had made, all the years I had devoted to him, had been in vain. The truth had been staring me in the face, but I had refused to see it. Now, I was determined to choose myself. "I don't want to waste any more time," I said, my voice steady. "I'm doing this for me, Sonia. She looked at me as if she had never seen me before, as if she didn't recognize the woman I had become. I didn't care. This was the new me. Stronger. Wiser. And ready to move on. I asked her not to tell Ryan about my plans. Though in all honesty, I knew he was too preoccupied with Lily now to even notice my absence. As far as I was concerned, I was already invisible to him. I sat in my small apartment that evening, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. The clock on. The wall ticked away the seconds, but they felt like hours. I couldn't stop thinking about the life I was about to leave behind. A life filled with so many sacrifices, so much pain. Yet it had all led me here, to this very moment. Ryan had been the youngest professor at the university when I first met him. A prodigy in his field, admired by everyone around him. His lectures were always full, students flocking to catch a glimpse of him. But he had been indifferent to all of them, until he met me. I used to believe that I was the one he had chosen, that somehow, I was special to him. But now, I knew the truth. I was just a placeholder. I looked like Lily. I was the shadow of a love that had never truly belonged to me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the betrayal had run. Ryan had never truly seen me for who I was. I had been a mirror to him, reflecting back the image of someone else, someone he could never forget. I had spent 2 years with him, building a life together, a life that was supposed to be ours. But it had always been about Lily. It had always been about the ghost of her. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the right decision. Was this really the beginning of my new life? Or was I simply running away from the reality I had created? The door to my apartment opened with a soft click, and I knew exactly who it was before I even heard his voice. "Ryan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer. And for the first time, I realized how little I cared. Part 2, The Calm Before the Storm. The days that followed my decision to leave were filled with a quiet, almost eerie calm. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to change, something to finally break free. I had always been the person who kept her emotions hidden, the person who gave without expecting anything in return. But now, there was a new sense of clarity, a sense of control that I had never felt before. It was time to stop living for others. Time to stop living in the shadows of Ryan and Lily. Yet, as the days went by, I couldn't ignore the strange, unsettling silence between us. Ryan and I had always communicated, even when our relationship felt strained. But now, there was nothing but space between us. It was as if he was waiting for something too. Something that would either repair the cracks in our relationship or shatter it entirely. I couldn't avoid him forever. We lived under the same roof, after all. But I had no intention of staying here long. The apartment, which had once felt like home, now felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on me, each day becoming more unbearable than the last. I had already made up my mind, this was the last straw. No more living for him. No more waiting. For a love that had never truly existed. One afternoon, just as I was preparing to leave the apartment to meet Sonia, I felt a chill creep up my spine. It was an odd sensation, one I couldn't quite explain. I stood by the window, looking out at the busy street below, watching the people going about their lives. I wanted to be one of them. Free. Carefree. Living without the burden of my past. But instead, I was stuck in a life that no longer belonged to me. Ryan's face flashed in my mind, his sharp features, his cold eyes. The same eyes that had once looked at me with affection, but now held nothing but indifference. I had been a fool to believe that he had ever truly cared for me. I was just a stepping stone, a placeholder until Lily came back into his life. It was always her. It would always be her. I shook my head, trying to dispel the thoughts that were clouding my mind. I needed to stay focused. I couldn't let him control me any longer. The moment I had been waiting for was drawing closer, and I couldn't afford to be distracted now. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I hesitated for a moment before walking over to open it. As soon as I swung the door open, I found myself face to face with Sonia. She looked both relieved and concerned, her eyes scanning me for any signs of distress. "Sophia," she said softly, her voice tinged with worry. "Are you sure about this? About everything?" I nodded, though the weight of her words lingered in the air. "Yes," I replied firmly. "This is the only way. I can't keep living like this." Sonia looked at me for a moment longer, as if trying to find the right words. She had always been the more cautious one, the one who thought things through before making decisions. But I could see that she understood. She had always known the truth about Ryan and me, even when I had tried to deny it. "All right," Sonia said, finally breaking the silence. "I just want you to be sure. You've been through a lot, and I don't want you to regret anything." I smiled at her, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I won't regret this. I've already given up too much for him. Now it's time to live for myself." Sonia reached out and gave me a reassuring hug, holding me close for a moment before pulling away. "Okay. Let's get going then." We walked out of the apartment together, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed a little easier. The weight of the decision had been lifted from my shoulders, and though I knew there would be challenges ahead, I felt ready to face them. The next few days passed in a blur. I had been preparing for this moment for so long, yet I couldn't quite believe it was actually happening. My study abroad application had been approved, and I was set to leave the country. But there was still so much to do. Packing. Saying goodbye. Tying up loose ends. I didn't want to be dramatic about it, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality as I packed my belongings into a suitcase. It wasn't just about leaving the apartment or even leaving Ryan behind, it was about leaving the version of myself that had been trapped in that toxic relationship. I was shedding my old skin, ready to start fresh. Sonia had been a huge help during this time. She had supported me through everything, and though she was hesitant about the idea of me leaving so abruptly, she knew it was for the best. She had even offered to help me find a place to stay once I left the country. It was comforting to know that I wasn't truly alone. As I packed, my thoughts drifted back to Ryan. I wondered what he was doing, where he was. Was he still trying to fix things with Lily? Was he even aware of how much I had already given up? The thought of him left me with a hollow feeling in my chest, but I quickly shook it off. There was no time to dwell on it. This was my time, my chance to start over. I couldn't waste it. That night, as I finished packing, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I knew it was him. Ryan. He had returned. I tried to push the nervousness aside, but it was impossible. Every time I saw him, it felt like I was facing a ghost from my past. The man I had loved, the man who had destroyed everything. I couldn't escape him. Not even now. The door to my room creaked open, and I turned to see him standing there, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, watching me as if trying to understand what was happening. "Sophia," he finally said, his voice low. "What's going on?" Why are you packing? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. I didn't want to answer him. I didn't owe him an explanation anymore. But I couldn't ignore the fact that his prison still affected me. It always had. I'm leaving, Ryan, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I'm leaving for good. His face fell, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret? Guilt? I couldn't be sure. But whatever it was fleeting. Leaving? Where are you going? He asked, his voice softening. I'm going abroad, I replied, my words firm. I'm going to study. I need to move on. I need to live for myself. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was thick, heavy with everything that had remained unsaid over the years. The things we had never talked about, the lies we had told ourselves. Finally, Ryan took a step toward me. Sophia, don't do this. We can still fix things. No, I interrupted, shaking my head. There's nothing left to fix. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. His eyes darkened, but I didn't flinch. I'm not the same person I was before, Ryan, I said, my voice steady. I've given everything to you, but it was never enough. Not for you. Not for Lily. So now, I'm choosing me. I'm going to live for myself. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, he just stood there, watching me. And in that moment, I realized that there was nothing he could say. The man I had once loved was gone. He had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I'm done, Ryan, I said quietly, Tenon. As I left the apartment that night, I knew there was no turning back. I was leaving everything behind, the memories, the pain, the person I had once been. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. The weight of the past had been lifted, and the future was finally mine to shape. I had no idea what awaited me, but for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. The journey ahead would be long, and there would be challenges. But I was ready to face them. Because this time I was choosing my own path. And no one could take that away from me. Part 3, The Butterfly Effect. The air felt different that day, lighter, somehow, as I walked through the crowded terminal toward my gate. There was no turning back. My suitcase rolled steadily behind me, a quiet companion in the new life I was choosing. The world beyond the airport doors was unfamiliar, but it was a world that was mine to explore. I had always felt like I was living in someone else's story. Now, finally, I was writing my own. I kept my head low, avoiding the curious gazes of people around me. The buzz of the terminal was drowned out by the steady beat of my heart, my pulse quickening with every step. I didn't know what awaited me in the coming days or what my future would look like, but for the first time I felt a sense of control. The flight was uneventful, the hum of the plane's engines lulling me into a restless sleep. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right decision. Was this what I truly wanted? Or was I simply running away from the pain of my past? In my previous life, I had let Ryan and Lily control the narrative of my existence. I had been trapped in the role they had written for me. This time, I was choosing to break free, to take back the power I had so willingly given away. The first few days abroad were a blur of paperwork, orientation sessions, and adjusting to a new city. I was staying in a small apartment, a temporary home before the semester began. The loneliness hit me hard at night, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about someone else's needs. someone else's feelings. It was strange and comforting all at once. I kept my distance from socializing too much. I needed time to heal, to reassemble the pieces of myself that had been scattered by years of living for someone else. I didn't want to be distracted by new people, new relationships. I was here to focus on my studies, to focus on myself. That was all that mattered. Back home, life continued without me. I knew that Ryan would notice my absence eventually, but part of me didn't care. He had never truly seen me before, not in the way I deserved. In the years we had spent together, he had been too preoccupied with Lily. Every time she called, every time she egged him, he had dropped everything. And I had stood by, silently waiting for his attention, for his love. But now, I was learning to stand on my own. To depend on no one but myself. Days turned into weeks, and I felt myself growing stronger. I poured myself into my studies, finding solace in the books and lectures that filled my days. Slowly, the pain of the past began to fade, though it never fully disappeared. I had been through too much to simply forget it. But I was learning to live with it, to accept it as a part of who I was. Sonia stayed in touch, of course. She sent me messages every few days, checking in on me, making sure I was doing okay. I was grateful for her friendship, but at the same time, I felt a certain distance growing between us. It wasn't that I didn't care for her, she had been my rock for so long, but I had changed. I wasn't the person I used to be. I had to learn to stand alone. One evening, after a particularly long day of lectures, I received a message from Sonia. I had been expecting her usual check-in, but this time, her words were different. "Sophia, you need to see this. There's something you should know. Ryan, he's not the man you thought he was." I frowned as I read the message, my stomach tightening. What did she mean? Ryan? What had he done now? I immediately picked up my phone and dialed her number. She picked up after the first ring. Her voice filled with urgency. "Sophia, you won't believe this," she said, almost out of breath. "There's a post going around on campus. It's about Ryan and Lily. It seems like, well, it's making everyone question his relationship with you." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I don't know the details," Sonia said, her voice low. "But it's all over the school forum. Apparently, someone posted about Ryan and Lily's connection, and people are starting to question his loyalty to you." The post was deleted, but not before it spread like wildfire. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew Ryan had been seeing Lily again, but I hadn't expected this. The thought of him being exposed like this, it was unsettling, to say the least. But part of me couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. It was the consequence of his actions, the result of the lies and betrayals that had defined our relationship. "I'll look into it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sophia, don't get involved. This could be bad for both of you," Sonia warned. "You don't need to worry about him anymore. Just focus on your new life." But even as she said that, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I had been a part of his world for too long to simply wash my hands of it now. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. And if this was what it took, then I would face it head-on. The next morning, I found myself scrolling through the school forum, looking for any trace of the post Sonia had mentioned. The forum was filled with posts from students, some expressing their admiration for Ryan, others mocking his relationship with Lily. But then I saw it. The post. It was still there, buried beneath a mountain of replies and comments. The post was titled, "The Real Ryan Carter." It was anonymous, but its content was damning. The post detailed Ryan's history with Lily, their secret meetings, and the timeline of when I had moved out. The post went on to claim that Ryan had been living a double life, playing the role of a loving fiancé to me while still holding on to his first love. The post ended with a plea for me to open my eyes and see the truth. I couldn't believe it. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled down to the comments, each one more hurtful than the last. Some stewed N.T.S. expressed sympathy for me, while others ridiculed me for staying with him for so long. The more I read, the more I realized just how much of my life had been a lie. How many people had known the truth about Ryan and Lily, yet I had been blind to it all. I closed my laptop and buried my face in my hands, the weight of it all crashing down on me. It wasn't enough that Ryan had betrayed me. Now, he was being exposed to the world. The man I had once loved, the man who had controlled every aspect of my life, was now a public spectacle. His reputation was crumbling, and I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of vindication. But even as I felt a flicker of satisfaction, I couldn't ignore the emptiness that gnawed at me. This wasn't how I had imagined my freedom. This wasn't how I had imagined my life after him. The path I had chosen was filled with uncertainty, and I didn't know where it would lead me. But one thing was clear, I would never go back. Not to Ryan. Not to the life I had left behind. Back in my apartment, I sat on the couch, staring at the screen of my phone. Ryan had called me several times since I left, but I had ignored every single one of his calls. I couldn't bring myself to speak to him, not after everything that had happened. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. I felt my phone vibrate again, this time with a message. It was from Ryan. "Sophia, please listen to me. I never wanted this. I never meant to hurt you. You have to understand, it's not what you think." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond, to confront him, but I knew that nothing he said could change what had already been done. The damage was irreversible. With a sigh, I deleted the message and set my phone down. It was time to let go. Over the next few days, I focused on my studies, determined to make the most of this second chance I had been given. But even as I tried to move forward, the shadow of my past seemed to follow me. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw Ryan's name. Every time I logged onto social media, I saw more posts about him and Lily. The rumors were relentless, and it seemed like the more I tried to escape, the harder it became to leave the past behind. But I refused to let it consume me. I refused to let Ryan and Lily define who I was anymore. I had a new life to build. And I was going to build it, no matter how hard it got. The next week, I received another message from Sonia. This time, it was different. The tone was more urgent. "Sophia, you need to hear this. Ryan, he's been investigating the rumors. He found out who posted them." I frowned as I read the message. What was this about? Who had posted the rumors? Before I could respond, another message popped up. It was Lily. She's the one who started it all. She wanted to ruin his reputation, to make sure he picked her over you. But it backfired. Everyone knows the truth now, Sophia. I stared at the message, stunned. Lily had done this? She had orchestrated it all? I didn't know what to think. But one thing was certain, the web of lies that had trapped me for so long was finally starting to unravel. And no matter what happened next, I was no longer going to be a part of it. Part 4, The Aftermath. The following days unfolded with an almost surreal quality, as if I was walking through a dream, not quite able to grasp the full extent of what was happening around me. The world I had left behind continued to churn, spinning wildly as the rumors about Ryan and Lily reached their boiling point. The student who had investigated them had torn apart their carefully constructed facade, and now, they were exposed for all to see. I had expected some kind of relief, maybe a sense of justice after all I had been through, but instead, I found myself increasingly conflicted. It wasn't the revenge I thought it would be. It wasn't satisfying at all. Watching Ryan's world crumble, watching his once pristine reputation dissolve into mockery, didn't feel like victory. It felt like a hollow reminder of all the years I had wasted, a bitter acknowledgement of just how far removed I had been from the man I had loved. I spent a lot of time reflecting, walking the quiet streets near my new apartment, trying to clear my mind. I wanted to be strong, to move forward with confidence, but it wasn't easy. I had given up so much for Ryan, and even though he had run me, the memories of our past together lingered like ghosts, haunting me at every turn. Was I really better off without him? Or was I just afraid of being alone? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just running from Ryan. I was running from everything he had made me believe about myself. He had made me feel unworthy of love, unworthy of anything outside of the life I had built around him. He had convinced me that my worth was tied to him, to his approval, to his eds. And I had believed him. But that was the past. And now, I had a chance to rebuild. The opportunity to start over, to find my own voice. It was what I had always wanted, but I had never known how to get it. It was late one afternoon when I received another message from Sonia. She had been my lifeline through all of this, my anchor in a stormy sea. This time, her message felt different, tinged with urgency. Sophia, I don't know how to tell you this, but Ryan wants to meet with you. He's been asking around about you, trying to find out where you're staying. He wants to explain, to apologize. He says he's realized what he's done, and he regrets everything. He's a mess, Sophia. I stared at the message for a long time, the words sinking in. Ryan wanted to meet? After everything that had happened? I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him to leave me alone, to finally be free of him once and for all. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the man I had loved, felt a strange pull. What if this was the closure I had been waiting for? What if, deep down, I needed to hear him say the words I had always longed to hear? I didn't know. I didn't know what was right anymore. I had spent so long living in his shadow that the idea of standing on my own felt alien. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had chosen myself. And whatever happened next, I would face it as the woman I had become, not the woman I had been. I sat back, taking a deep breath. What I had to do. Later that week, I found myself standing outside a quiet cafe, the place where we had agreed to meet. My heart was pounding, my palms sweating despite the cool breeze that ruffled my hair. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but I knew it was something I had to do. I had no idea what Ryan was thinking, what he was hoping to accomplish by asking for this meeting. But I had to hear him out. For my own peace of mind. As I stepped inside, I saw him sitting at a corner table, his back to me. His hair was messier than I remembered, his suit slightly disheveled. The polished, composed image he had once projected was gone, replaced by someone who seemed lost. He didn't notice me immediately, so I stood there for a moment, just watching him, wondering if this was really the man I had spent so many years loving. When he finally turned and saw me, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret? Guilt? Or was it something else entirely? He stood up quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sophia, he said, his voice low. Thank you for meeting me. I know. I know I don't deserve your time. But I need to explain. Please, just hear me out. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I wanted to hear. Words could never undo the damage he had caused, never take back the years I had spent in his shadow. But I couldn't deny the part of me that still longed for the explanation he owed me. He motioned for me to sit, and I did, my hands clasped tightly in my lap as I waited for him to speak. I don't even know where to begin, Ryan continued, his voice trembling slightly. I've done so many things wrong, so many things I can never take back. But I need you to know that I was never trying to hurt you, Sophia. I never meant for any of this to happen. Lily, she has a way of pulling me in, and I let her. I let her drag me back into her world. I was weak, and I couldn't see what I had with you until it was too late. I didn't say anything, didn't interrupt. I let him talk, though every word that left his mouth felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I thought I could fix everything. I thought that if I helped Lily, if I was there for her, it would make everything right. But I was wrong. I should have been with you. I should have seen what we had, what we could have been. And now, I don't know what's left for me. I've lost everything, Sophia. I've lost you. And I don't know how to live with that. His words hung in the air, heavy and laden with regret. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in so long. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. That man had been a stranger to me, someone who could be so blind, so selfish. The truth was, I wasn't sure I even liked the person who sat in front of me now. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could change everything, but I can't. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness. I didn't know what to say. I had already made my peace with everything. My life had moved on, and so had I. But as I sat there, listening to him, I realized something: no amount of apologies would ever change the past. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. Ryan, I said softly, my voice steady, I can't forgive you. I won't. Not because I don't want to, but because I've already forgiven myself. I'm not the person I used to be. I'm not the woman who would sacrifice everything for you. I've learned that my life is mine to live, not yours to control. Ryan's face fell, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, regret? It didn't matter. He had already made his choices. The truth was, he didn't need me to forgive him. He needed to learn to forgive himself. I stood up, my heart steady and unbroken. There was nothing left to say. I had said what needed to be said. I walked away from the cafe, from Ryan, and from the life we had built together. It was over. I didn't look back. Over the next few days, I immersed myself fully in my studies and the life I was building abroad. The past was behind me, and I wasn't going to let it define me any longer. Sonia continued to check in on me, her concern evident in every message, but I reassured her that I was okay. In fact, I was more than okay. I was finally free. Ryan's calls became less frequent. Each time I saw his name on my phone, I would simply silence it, knowing that there was nothing left to say. The truth had been revealed, and there was nothing he could do to change it. And me? I was moving on, stronger than ever. This was my second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. Part 5, The Reckoning. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, I felt a stronger sense of independence and self-worth. It was like stepping into a world I had never known before, a world where my choices were my own, where I no longer had to wait for validation from anyone else. For so long, I had lived in the shadow of Ryan's indifference, suffocating under the weight of expectations that weren't mine. Now, I was free. The weight had been lifted, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. But with freedom came challenges. The journey I had started was not going to be easy, and though I was determined, I knew there would be obstacles ahead. The past may have been behind me, but its shadow still loomed, and I couldn't avoid them forever. It was one chilly evening, about a month after our meeting in the cafe, when I received a phone call from Sonia. I had been sitting in my small apartment, the warm light from the lamp casting a cozy glow on the walls, when her name flashed on my phone. I answered quickly, the familiar voice on the other end instantly bringing a sense of comfort. "Sophia," Sonia said, her voice quiet but filled with concern. "Something's happened." My heart skipped a beat. I could tell from her tone that something was wrong, something I wasn't prepared for. "What is it?" I asked, my voice steady but anxious. "It's Ryan," she said, and I could hear the worry in her voice. "I know you don't want to deal with him, but he's not well. He's been coming to campus every day, asking about you. He's been obsessive. And now, he's really unraveling." I felt a tight knot form in my stomach at the mention of his name. After everything, Ryan was still trying to worm his way back into my life. Hadn't he learned his lesson? He had caused me so much pain, and yet, there he was again, trying to drag me back into his chaos. "Sonia, I've moved on," I said firmly, though my voice faltered slightly. "He needs to deal with his own mess. I can't help him anymore." I know, Sonia replied quickly, trying to reassure me. "But this is different. It's like he's lost himself. He's not the man you knew. He's falling apart." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Sonia, I can't do this. I can't go back. I've already let go of that life. Ryan's problems aren't mine to solve." "I know, Sophia," Sonia said softly. "I just wanted you to know. He's not himself. And it's clear he regrets everything." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me still cared for him, but it was a distant, fleeting feeling, one that had been slowly eroded by the reality of who he truly was. I had to protect myself. There was nothing left for me to give him. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But I can't help him. I've made my decision." As I hung up the phone, a sense of finality washed over me. I had been living in a kind of suspended animation for so long, torn between my love for Ryan and my desire for freedom. Now, I knew what I had to do. I had to fully close that chapter of my life and step forward into the future that awaited me. The next day, I went to campus for my lecture, determined not to let Ryan's presence, or Sonia's concern, sway me from the life I had chosen. But as I walked across the campus grounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavier, as though a storm was brewing, and my steps seemed slower, more deliberate. I was about to enter the lecture hall when I saw him. Ryan stood at the far end of the corridor, his gaze fixed on me. For a moment, I froze. He was standing there, not in the confident, composed way he used to, but slumped, his shoulders hunched in defeat. His face was drawn, pale, and his eyes, they no longer held the sharp, distant edge I had once known. There was something else in them now, vulnerability. Pain. "Sophia," he said softly, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. "Can we talk? Please." I wanted to turn away, to walk right past him without a word, but something about the way he stood there, his face a mask of exhaustion and regret, stopped me. Maybe it was the human part of me, the part that had once loved him so deeply, that made me hesitate. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. I just need a chance to explain," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you. But I swear, I've been trying to fix things. I've been trying to figure out what went wrong. I've been lost, Sophia." I stared at him for a long moment, my emotions swirling inside me. I could see that he was sincere in some twisted way, but that didn't change anything. His apology, his regret, it all seemed so empty now. He had done nothing but let me down. And I had let him. The truth was, I had given him too much of myself, and it had destroyed me. "You're not the man I thought you were, Ryan," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You never were. I don't need you to explain anything. I don't need your words. You've already shown me who you are. And I'm done with it." His face fell, his eyes pleading. "Please, Sophia. I can't lose you. I need you." But I stood my ground, my resolve hardening with every word he spoke. "You already lost me, Ryan. A long time ago. It wasn't just Lily. It was you. It was everything you put me through. And I can't keep making excuses for you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. He stood there, staring at me with those haunted eyes, as if he couldn't believe the words that had just come out of my mouth. It was clear that he had expected me to forgive him, to take him back, but I had already moved on. I was no longer that woman. I wasn't going to sacrifice my happiness for his mistakes. I turned away, my heart heavy, but resolute. "Goodbye, Ryan." As I walked away from him, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had said what I needed to say, and I had finally let go. The ties that had once bound me to him were gone, severed completely. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. It was time to move on, to leave him and everything he represented behind. But the consequences of my past actions continued to reverberate through my life. I had chosen freedom, but it hadn't come without cost. Ryan wasn't the only one who was affected by everything that had happened. The next day, I was bombarded with messages from friends and colleagues on campus, all curious about the rumors that had been circulating. They wanted to know the truth, they wanted to know why Ryan and I had broken up. Some even speculated that I had been the one to initiate the breakup, casting me in a light I didn't recognize. It was all part of the fallout. Part of the wreckage that followed Ryan and Lily's unraveling. It wasn't my place to correct them. It wasn't my responsibility to clean up the mess they had created. I had my own life to live now, one that wasn't defined by their drama, their lies. As I stood in front of my class later that day, the weight of the past slowly lifted off my shoulders. I could feel the shift in myself, in the way I carried myself. I was no longer defined by the man who had once held my heart in his hands. I was defined by my own choices, by my own strength. And for the first time I was truly free. Part 6, Rebirth and New Beginnings. The weeks that followed felt like a blur, a mixture of challenges, growth, and the ever-present realization that I had I made it. I was living a life that was entirely my own, free from the clutches of a toxic relationship, free from the weight of years spent sacrificing my happiness for someone else. Ryan's shadow still loomed over me at times, especially when I least expected it, but I had learned to navigate life without him. He was a chapter in my story, but no longer the author. One evening, while I was grading papers in my small apartment, my phone buzzed. I had learned to ignore the constant stream of notifications, but something about this one made me pause. It was a message from Sonia. Sophia, I don't know how to tell you this, but Ryan, he's trying to make things right. He's not giving up. I think you should know. I stared at the message for a moment, unsure of what to feel. Ryan's efforts to reach out had been relentless ever since our last meeting, but this felt different. I had made my peace with everything, and the thought of reopening that chapter seemed impossible. I had no intention of falling back into that familiar cycle of pain, of forgiveness that meant nothing. But a part of me, the part that had loved him once, the part that wanted to believe in the good inside him, felt a pang of curiosity. I decided to call Sonia. Her voice came through the phone, heavy with hesitation. Sophia, she said softly. I don't want you to feel pressured, but I think you should hear what he's been doing. He's not the same person anymore. How do you know? I asked, my voice calm but weary. How do you know he's changed? Sonia paused for a moment before answering, and when she spoke again, her voice was tinged with uncertainty. I don't know if he has, but I know he's trying. He's been volunteering. At a shelter, helping people, doing everything he can to atone for his past mistakes. He says he wants to be a better person. For himself. For you. I felt a mixture of emotions stir inside me, confusion, anger, a strange sense of sadness. Sonia, I said, my voice firm but low. He had his chance. I gave him everything. And now, he's too late. Sonia was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her words were slow, almost hesitant. I know, Sophia. I know. But sometimes people change, and maybe you deserve to know that he's trying to make things right, even if it's too late. The silence that followed hung heavy between us. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream at her for even bringing Ryan up again. But part of me, a small part, was still hurting. The wounds may have healed, but they hadn't completely disappeared. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine, like I was unaffected. But I was stronger now. I had chosen my path, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Ryan, steer me off course. Thank you, Sonia, I said, my voice calm and composed. But I've made my decision. I'm not going back to him. I'm not the person I used to be. And I won't allow him to pull me back into his world. I hung up the phone, feeling an overwhelming sense of closure. Sonia meant well, but it was time for me to take the final step. I had already forgiven myself for the choices I made, and I wasn't going to let Ryan's newfound regrets drag me into the past. As the months passed, my life slowly began to take shape. I focused on my studies, diving deep into my research, and embracing the opportunities that came with my new life abroad. There was a sense of liberation that came from being on my own. From knowing that I wasn't tied to anyone or anything. The friends I had made in my new city were supportive, understanding, and most of all, they didn't have any preconceived notions about me. I was no longer the woman defined by her past, but someone who was creating her future. I began to write again, something I hadn't done in years. It was a small act of rebellion against the life I had been forced to live for so long, and it felt like a step in the right direction. The words flowed easily at first, but as I continued, I realized that I was writing not just for myself, but for the woman I was becoming. The woman who had chosen herself. Then came a day when I received an unexpected email. It was from a journal I had submitted an article to months ago, when I first arrived in the city. To my surprise, they had accepted my article for publication. The realization hit me like a wave. I was finally being recognized for something I had done, not something I had given up. The joy that surged within me was unexpected. I hadn't realized how much I had craved validation until this moment. For so long, I had been overlooked, dismissed. But now, I had earned this recognition. It wasn't a prize I had won because of anyone else's actions, but because of my own hard work, my own determination. In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The past, the pain, the heartbreak, they no longer had power over me. They were pieces of my history, but not the story of who I was becoming. The woman who was reborn, who refused to let anyone else dictate her future, was now real. That evening, I went to bed with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had nothing left to prove to anyone. Not Ryan. Not Lily. Not even to myself. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of my past, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see the ghost of Ryan's face or the shadows of the life we had shared. Instead, I saw the path ahead of me, a path I was walking with my own 2 feet, unencumbered by anyone else's expectations. I had come so far, and yet, I knew that my journey had only just begun. The future was wide open, full of endless possibilities. And for the first time, I felt truly free. The phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't a message from Sonia, or Ryan, or anyone from my past. It was a new notification, a new opportunity. It was time to move forward, with no regrets and no looking back. My future was mine to shape.